You cook, clean, sacrifice everything, and still get called the maid in your own house on your son's birthday. That's what happened to me. My son Nathan didn't just mock me. He laughed while his wife called me the maid, then told me I was irrelevant. But here's what they didn't know: Nathan might not even be my real son. I'm Evelyn Harper, a retired teacher who gave up everything to build a life for my children, only to be erased from it. But I found the hospital records, the diary, the truth. And I found Daniel, the son I was meant to raise. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, this story will show you how I took back my power, how I exposed their lies, reclaimed my house, and found the family I deserved. I paid every cent for that home. And when Sophia smirked and called me the maid, I tossed her the keys and said, "Good luck with the mortgage." If you're a mother still waiting to be seen, don't scroll away. One truth could change everything for you too. Before we begin, can I ask you something simple? Are you someone who loves quietly behind the scenes, like a mother, a daughter, or a friend who always puts others first? Leave a 1 if that sounds like you, or 2 if you're more the bold, outspoken type. I read every comment, and your answer might just shape the next part of this story. Let's take the first step together. I arranged my mother's china on the dining room table, each plate a fragile piece of her memory, expecting gratitude for Nathan's birthday. Their laughter sliced through me like glass. This house in Worthington, Ohio, my life's work, felt like a prison tonight. Did they ever see me as more than a servant? The March 2024 air carried a chill, but inside, candles flickered, casting soft shadows on the oak-paneled walls. The aroma of grilled chicken basted with rosemary and lemon drifted from the kitchen. A Bluetooth speaker hummed low jazz its notes, weaving through the chatter of guests. Outside, the oak-lined street glowed under streetlights, a quiet suburban promise I'd built for my family. I smoothed my apron, humming to the music, proud of the spread I'd spent all day preparing. Nathan, my son, turned 35 today. I'd raised him here in this house I'd bought with my inheritance after years of teaching second graders. Every mortgage payment, every late-night shift was for him and Abby. For Richard, too, though he'd been more married to his financial planning job than to me back then. I wanted this night to be perfect, a moment to feel like a mother again. In the living room, I caught Sophia's voice, sharp and low, whispering to Nathan. "She's always hovering, isn't she?" Her tone was like a needle, precise and cutting. Nathan chuckled. "Let her play house." My breath caught. I gripped the edge of the counter, the cold granite steadying me. Sophia, his wife, always had a way of making me feel small, but Nathan's laugh, that stung deeper. I brushed it off, telling myself it was just their way, and carried the chicken to the dining room. The table was a picture of warmth, linen napkins, my mother's china, gleaming wine glasses catching the candlelight. Guests, neighbors, Sophia's colleagues chatted, their voices blending with the jazz. Nathan sat at the head, his dark hair slicked back, his smile wide for Sophia's benefit. Sophia, in a sleek black dress, radiated confidence, her eyes scanning the room like she owned it. Abby, my daughter, fiddled with her napkin, her face half hidden by her phone. Richard, my husband, scrolled through emails, his glasses reflecting the screen's glow. I stood at the table's edge, waiting for a glance, a thank you, anything. Sophia raised her glass, her smile sharp. To Nathan's future, she said, pausing. Then with a smirk, and to Evelyn, our maid, keeping it spotless, laughter erupted, a wave that crashed over me. Nathan grinned, leaning back. "You're just a burden now, Mom," he added, his voice casual, like he was joking. But his eyes didn't meet mine. Abby giggled nervously, her cheeks flushing. Richard didn't look up, his thumb still scrolling. My chest tightened, a vice squeezing my heart. I forced a smile, lips trembling, and nodded as if I were in on the joke. The room spun the jazz, now a mocking hum. I excused myself, my voice barely a whisper, and slipped into the kitchen. The laughter followed me, echoing off the tiled walls. I set the serving tray down, my hands shaking. How had it come to this? I'd given up my teaching dreams for Nathan, and Abby worked double shifts to buy this house. When Richard's early career faltered, I'd framed their school photos, sewn their Halloween costumes, baked their birthday cakes. And now I was their maid, a burden. My fingers brushed my mother's keychain in my apron pocket, its worn metal a reminder of her strength. I needed that now. Nathan's footsteps thudded behind me. "Mom, stay out of our party," he hissed, his hand gripping my arm tight enough to sting. He pushed me toward the hallway, his eyes cold. "You're embarrassing us." I stumbled, catching myself on the counter. My heart pounded not from fear, but from a raw, aching hurt. I turned to leave, but Nathan's phone buzzed on the counter screen, lighting up. A text from Sophia. "Get her out before she ruins it." My throat closed. This wasn't just a joke. They wanted me gone. I clutched the keychain, its edges biting into my palm. I'd built this house, this family, with every piece of myself. Did I raise them, or did they erase me? Their laughter rang out again, carefree, as if I'd never existed. I straightened my apron, still tied, but something inside me shifted. I wasn't their servant. Not anymore. Why did Sophia want me gone so badly I didn't slam the door when I left? My silence was louder than their mockery. This house, built with my sacrifices, was theirs for too long. Did they know I could take it back? I gripped my purse, the leather worn from years of use, and clutched my mother's keychain, its metal cool against my palm. The oak-lined streets of Worthington, Ohio, stretched dark and quiet before me. Streetlights casting fleeting glows on the windshield. My hands shook as I started the car, Nathan's voice echoing in my head. "Mom, come back!" he'd shouted barefoot on the porch. I didn't look back. The jazz from the dining room faded, replaced by the hum of the engine and my own ragged breaths. Tears blurred the road, but I drove on each mile, a step away from their laughter. Nathan's words, "You're just a burden," now cut deeper than Sophia's maid jab. I'd given up my teaching career for him, and Abby worked nights to pay the mortgage when Richard was building his business. This house, my pride, was my prison tonight. I turned onto a side street, the oaks looming like silent judges, and pulled up to my late-aunt's apartment. The building sagged its paint, peeling a relic of a life I'd almost forgotten. Inside, the air was musty heavy, with the scent of old wood and faded wallpaper. The floorboards creaked under my steps, each sound a reminder of my solitude. I dropped my purse on a wobbly kitchen table, the keychain clinking against it. My hands still trembled as I unpacked a small suitcase, 2 sweaters, a pair of jeans, my old reading glasses. I paused, staring at the empty room. I'd raised Nathan and Abby here in Worthington, framed their school pictures, cheered at their games. For what to be pushed out of my own home? My chest ached, a hollow pain that wasn't just hurt, it was betrayal. The phone buzzed in my purse, sharp and insistent. Sophia's name flashed on the screen. I hesitated, my thumb hovering, then answered. "Don't make this harder, Evelyn," she said, her voice smooth, taunting. "You're being dramatic. Come back and apologize." My jaw tightened. Apologize for what? Cooking their dinner, paying their bills. I hung up the silence in the room louder than her words. Nathan's push, his grip on my arm, still stung. I rubbed my wrist, feeling the ghost of his fingers. The audience in my mind, other mothers, other women, would feel this too, the sting of being erased. I sank onto a faded couch, its springs groaning. My sacrifices flashed before me, quitting my job to raise the kids, using my aunt's inheritance for the house down payment, staying up late to balance budgets while Richard worked. I'd thought it was love, but was it? I opened my purse, pulling out a small notebook I'd kept since Nathan's first birthday. I wrote, "I gave my life." For what? The words blurred as tears fell, but something shifted inside me. Not rage, not yet, but clarity. I wasn't their servant anymore. As I unpacked, my fingers brushed a drawer in the kitchen table. It stuck, then gave way with a scrape. Inside, tucked beneath yellowed receipts, was a single page from my aunt's diary, her handwriting shaky but clear. I never told Evelyn the truth about that night, it read. My heart stopped. What night my aunt, a nurse, had been at the hospital when Nathan was born. I read the line again, my pulse quickening. I'm done being their servant. I whispered the words, a vow to myself. If you found out the child you raised might not even be yours, would your heart break from the truth or from all the years spent loving a lie? What I uncovered next changed everything. If you've ever questioned what family really means, drop a 6 in the comments because this part, it still haunts me. Was I their mother or just their servant? The diary page trembled in my hand, its edges worn like a secret waiting to breathe. What truth did my aunt hide in that diary? Nathan's voice at the community center wasn't an apology. It was a knife to my heart. I paid for their lives, every brick of that house. Did they know I held the deed to their future? The Worthington Community Center buzzed with the farmers' market's energy folding tables laden with apple pies and jars of homemade jam. Laughter and chatter mingled with the scent of cinnamon and fresh produce. Inside, fluorescent lights cast a harsh glow, but outside, the autumn air was crisp oak leaves skittering across the parking lot. I clutched a pie I'd baked, hoping to mend the rift from Nathan's birthday. My hand still stung from his grip, his words, "You're just a burden," echoing louder than the market's hum. I spotted Nathan near a table, his shoulders squared, chatting with neighbors. Sophia stood beside him, her smile polished, her black scarf fluttering like a warning. Abby lingered nearby, her eyes darting, her phone clutched tight. I approached pie in hand, heart pounding with foolish hope. "Nathan," I said, my voice soft, "I brought this for the potluck." His eyes flicked to me, cold and sharp. "You're irrelevant now, Mom," he snapped loud enough for heads to turn. "Why are you even here?" Sophia smirked, stepping forward and pushed me aside with her shoulder. "Stay out of our way," she hissed. The pie wobbled in my hands, my cheeks burning as whispers spread. Abby looked down, her face flushed, but said nothing. My throat tightened, the hurt raw and jagged. How could my son, the boy I'd raised, dismiss me like this? I retreated to my aunt's apartment, the creaky floorboards groaning under my steps. The dim light barely reached the faded wallpaper, and the air felt heavy like my grief. Nathan's words cut deeper than Sophia's push, each syllable a betrayal of the years I'd spent quitting teaching, scraping by to pay the mortgage, building a home for him and Abby. I set the pie on the counter, its crust cracked from my trembling hands. The phone rang, Nathan's name flashing. I answered, my voice steady despite the ache. "I paid for your life, Nathan," I said. "Every cent of that house." He scoffed. "It's ours now, old lady. Stop clinging to the past." His tone was venomous, protecting Sophia's image, their status. I hung up my fingers, curling into fists. Anger surged, hot and righteous, replacing the hurt. I wasn't their servant, I was their mother. I sank to the floor, my back against the couch, and noticed a corner of something under it. I reached, pulling out a locked wooden box, its edges worn my aunt's initials carved into the lid. My pulse quickened. Remembering her diary page from last week, I never told Evelyn the truth. I tugged at the lock, but it held fast, a secret just out of reach. Outside, Nathan's voice carried through the thin walls on a call in the parking lot. "We need the house money fast," he said, his tone desperate. My heart raced. Sophia's business was failing, and they were banking on my home. My phone buzzed Abby's name on the screen. Her text read, "I'm sorry, Mom. I didn't know." Her words were a flicker of hope, but Nathan's betrayal burned brighter. "How do you love a son who hurts you?" I clutched the box, its weight anchoring my anger. Their greed, their cruelty had pushed me too far. I'd find the truth not just for me, but for the mother I'd been. "What's in the locked box?" my aunt left. Diane's quiet words hit like a thunderclap, hinting at a secret that could unravel my life. My aunt's diary was a locked door. Did it hide the truth about my son? The apartment in Worthington, Ohio smelled of musty air, its cluttered corners stuffed with my aunt's old furniture, crooked lamps, a sagging armchair, faded curtains swaying in the draft. The floorboards creaked under my steps, each groan echoing my unease. Nathan's voice from the community center, "You're irrelevant now," still burned, his words sharper than Sophia's shove. I rubbed my shoulder, the ache lingering, and sat at the wobbly kitchen table, the locked box from yesterday staring back like a challenge. A knock rattled the door. Diane Coleman stepped in her gray scarf, loose her eyes, soft but heavy. "Evelyn," she said, setting down a tin of homemade cookies. "I know how it feels to lose a child's respect." Her voice cracked, and I remembered her story, divorced, estranged from her son, a wound we shared. She sat across from me, her hands folding tight. "Your aunt, when we were nurses together, she told me something about the hospital the night Nathan was born." My pulse quickened. What, I asked, leaning forward. Diane hesitated, her fingers tracing the tin's edge. There was a rumor, a mix-up in the nursery. She never confirmed it, but she carried it like a weight. My chest tightened, Nathan's cruel dismissal flashing in my mind. Was there more to their betrayal than I knew? Diane suggested coffee, and we drove to a cozy Worthington shop, its espresso machine, humming the air thick with the scent of fresh pastries. We settled at a corner table, the clink of cups around us. Diane pulled out her phone, her face grim. "I got this yesterday," she said, showing an email from a former colleague. 1990 records show a nursery mix-up, it read. Files were sealed. My hands trembled, coffee sloshing in my mug. "What didn't she tell me?" I whispered. Diane reached across her hand, warm on mine. "Your aunt wanted to protect you, but maybe it's time." My heart raced, anger stirring not just at Nathan and Sophia, but at a past that might have stolen something from me. The audience women like me would feel this too, the sting of a hidden truth. Back at the apartment, moonlight slipped through cracked blinds, casting shadows on the peeling wallpaper. I knelt by the couch, the locked box heavy in my hands. The key from my mother's keychain tucked in my pocket since the birthday dinner fit perfectly. The lock clicked, and I lifted the lid, my breath catching. Inside was my aunt's diary, its pages yellowed, and a letter tucked between them. "Nathan may not be yours," it read, her handwriting shaky. A photo slid out, a newborn wrapped in a hospital blanket labeled Sullivan. My fingers froze, the words blurring. Anger surged hot and sharp at a hospital, a system of family that had let me love a lie. What if the son I raised was never mine? The photo trembled in my hand, the baby's face a stranger's. I'd given everything to Nathan, my career, my savings, my home. Now this letter was a spark igniting my resolve to find the truth. Who was this Sullivan baby in the photo? I stood outside his bookstore, watching a man who might be my son, and my heart broke all over again. The diary's truth was alive in front of me. Could I claim it without losing myself? Daniel's bookstore in Worthington, Ohio, stood quiet, its green-painted exterior catching the late afternoon sun. Warm light spilled onto the sidewalk, mingling with the smell of old books and fresh coffee from within. My fingers clutched the photo from my aunt's diary, the name Sullivan scrawled on the back. Nathan's cruel words, "You're irrelevant now," and Sophia's shove at the community center still burned a wound that fueled my steps. I'd given everything to a son who pushed me away. Now I stood on the edge of a truth that could redefine it all. Back at the apartment, I'd spread the hospital documents across the kitchen table, their faded ink confirming the unthinkable. Nathan wasn't mine. A nursery mix-up 35 years ago had stolen my real son. My phone buzzed, Diane's text flashing. "Go see him," it read. My heart pounded as I drove through Worthington's oak-lined streets, the leaves turning gold in the autumn light. I parked across from the bookstore, my hands trembling on the steering wheel. The documents, the photo, the diary, they all pointed to Daniel Sullivan, my son. The thought was a knife, sharp with grief and hope. I stepped out, the air crisp, and stood in the bookstore's shadow watching. Inside, Daniel moved with a quiet grace, his dark hair falling over his glasses as he helped a customer find a poetry book. His smile was gentle, his voice soft but sure. "This one's my favorite," he said, handing over a slim volume. My throat tightened. He was nothing like Nathan, who dismissed me, pushed me out. I pressed a hand to the glass, tears welling. I lost you before I knew you. I whispered my breath, fogging the window. The pain of Nathan's betrayal. Sophia's cruelty crashed over me. I'd raised a stranger, loved him with every piece of me, only to be called irrelevant. But Daniel, he was here alive, and I didn't know how to reach him. Women like me, mothers who'd sacrificed everything, would feel this ache, this longing for a child they'd never held. A young woman stepped out her phone, playing a recording as she laughed. Daniel's voice crackled through. "I always wondered about my adoption," he said, casual but wistful. Something never felt right. I froze, clutching the diary photo, its edges biting into my palm. My heart raced. He suspected. The customer tucked her phone away, oblivious, but the words lingered, a spark in the dark. I wiped my eyes, my fingers shaking. This wasn't just a hospital mistake. It was a life stolen, mine, his. Anger at the deception, at the years lost, mixed with a fragile hope. Daniel's kindness, his ease, was a contrast to Nathan's coldness. Could I love a son I'd never raised? Can you love a son you never raised? I stood there, the bookstore's warmth calling, but my feet rooted to the sidewalk. The recording echoed in my mind, a clue to Daniel's own questions. I had to know more. What did Daniel know about his adoption? Sophia's perfect life was a house of cards, and I held the deed to topple it. My house was my power. Did they feel it slipping away? The bookstore cafe in Worthington, Ohio, hummed with life, its wooden tables scarred from years of use, the air thick with the scent of fresh coffee and warm scones. I sat across from Daniel, my hands wrapped around a steaming mug, his green-painted bookstore glowing softly behind us. Nathan's cruel words, "You're irrelevant now," and Sophia's shove at the community center still stung, fueling a fire in my chest. I'd loved a son who wasn't mine, poured my life into a home they claimed. But the diary, the hospital documents, had cracked open a truth. I wasn't done yet. Daniel slid a coffee refill across the table, his smile gentle, his glasses slipping down his nose. "You're familiar somehow," he said, tilting his head. My heart skipped, but I forced a smile, hiding the photo in my purse, the one labeled Sullivan. "Just a regular customer," I said, my voice light, but my fingers tightened on the mug. His kindness, so unlike Nathan's coldness, stirred a fragile hope. I wanted to tell him to spill the hospital's secret, but not yet. I sipped the coffee, its bitterness grounding me. My anger at Nathan and Sophia, at the years stolen by a nursery mix-up, was shifting. I wasn't just a mother scorned, I was a woman ready to fight. Back at my aunt's apartment, the faint buzz of Worthington's farmers market drifted through the open window, carrying the scent of apples and wood smoke. Legal papers littered the table, my laptop glowing beside them. I'd spent hours digging into Sophia's business, her so-called lifestyle brand. Fake clients, maxed out credit cards, a leased car she couldn't afford. Her empire was a sham. Then I found it tucked in a folder from my aunt, the house deed, my name alone in bold ink. I'd paid every cent, never signed it over. My breath caught. Nathan and Sophia lived in my house, built on my sacrifices. My teaching career abandoned, my inheritance drained. I dialed a lawyer, my voice steady. It's time I said my resolve, hardening like steel. Women like me who'd given everything would cheer this moment, the moment I took back control. My phone buzzed, Abby's name lighting up the screen. "I didn't know how much you did for us," her text read. My throat tightened. Abby, who'd laughed nervously at Nathan's birthday, was starting to see me. I smiled, but another buzz interrupted a text from one of Sophia's sponsors. "Funds don't add up," it said. My grin widened, sharp and certain. Someone was sniffing around Sophia's lies, and I hadn't even made my move yet. "I'm not invisible anymore," I said to the empty room, my voice echoing off the creaky floorboards. Did they think I'd stay silent forever? I stacked the legal papers, the deed on top, its weight, a promise. Sophia's world was unraveling, and I held the thread. How did her sponsor learn about her lies? Nathan's rage tore through my past, ripping apart the memories I'd cherished. I raised him with love. Did he ever see me as more than a means to an end? The dim light in my aunt's Worthington, Ohio apartment filtered through dusty blinds, casting jagged shadows on the creaky floorboards. The air was stale heavy with the weight of betrayal. Nathan's cruel words from the community center. "You're irrelevant now," and Sophia's shove burned in my chest. But the diary's truth about the hospital switch cut deeper. I sat at the kitchen table, the locked box open, its secrets spilling out. I'd loved a son who wasn't mine, and now I was ready to fight for justice. The door slammed open, Nathan's footsteps heavy. His face was flushed eyes, wild with desperation. "You're hiding here, ruining everything," he shouted, spotting my photo album on the counter. Snapshots of him and Abby birthday school, plays my life's work. He grabbed it, tearing pages with a snarl. "You're ruining our lives." The sound of ripping paper was a knife to my heart. I lunged forward, my voice sharp. "You broke us first, Nathan." My hands shook, trying to save the tattered memories, but he pushed the album to the floor, photos scattering like leaves. His cruelty, built on years of taking my sacrifices for granted, was a punch to the gut. Women like me who'd poured their souls into their children would feel this outrage, this violation of love. Abby's text had promised a meeting, and I drove to a quiet Worthington park, autumn leaves crunching under my boots, the faint laughter of children drifting from a playground. Abby sat on a bench, her face pale. Sophie beside her clutching a notebook. "I should have seen your strength sooner," Mom Abby said, her voice breaking. "I was so caught up with work with Sophia." Her eyes, so like mine, glistened with guilt. Sophie, my granddaughter, handed me a folded paper, her smile shy. "You're my hero, Grandma," she said. I unfolded her poem lines about a woman standing tall against storms. My throat tightened, their words, a balm against Nathan's destruction. Abby's remorse, Sophie's loyalty were threads of hope, weaving a new family from the ashes of the old. Back at the apartment, moonlight spilled through the blinds, illuminating the torn album. I knelt, gathering photos, and found a diary entry tucked inside my aunt's handwriting, faint. "Nathan was always distant, even as a boy," it read. My breath caught. Had he felt the switch too? Anger surged, not just at Nathan, but at the hospital that stole my real son. I faced Nathan, who'd followed me back, his jaw tight. "You're not my son," I said, holding up the hospital documents, my voice steady. His eyes widened, then narrowed, denying the truth I'd uncovered. My resolve hardened, a fire stoked by his selfishness and Sophia's lies. "How do you forgive a son who destroys you?" I clutched a torn photo of Nathan as a child, my heart torn between love and justice. The diary's words were a clue pushing me toward a truth that could change everything. How would Nathan react to the truth about his birth? Sophia's empire crumbled, and I was the one to pull the first thread. I owned the house they claimed. Did they feel their world slipping away? The Worthington Community Center buzzed with locals, the air thick with the scent of apple pie and brewed coffee. Folding tables groaned under potluck dishes, and chatter rose over the clink of forks. Autumn light streamed through tall windows, casting golden patches on the linoleum floor. Nathan's voice, his cruel, "You're nothing to us," from weeks ago, still echoed, paired with the sting of his grip on my arm at the birthday dinner. Sophia's shove her mocking maid fueled my fire. I'd uncovered their lies, the hospital switch, and the deed in my name. Today I wasn't hiding. I carried a tray of homemade cookies, my hands steady despite my racing heart. The crowd parted, and there was Nathan, his jaw-tight eyes darting. Sophia stood beside him, her smile forced her scarf knotted too tight. I approached, my chin high, but Nathan stepped forward, his voice loud. "You're nothing to us," he shouted, grabbing my arm, his fingers digging in. Locals turned, whispers rippling. My tray wobbled, cookies sliding. "I own the house you live in," I said, pulling free, my voice clear. His eyes widened and Sophia's face paled. "You're delusional," she snapped, but her voice shook. The crowd's murmurs grew, their eyes on me, not her. My heart pounded, not with fear, but with resolve. I'd been their mother, their bank, their servant. No more. Women like me, who'd sacrificed everything, would feel this moment the spark of standing tall. I left the center, my steps firm, and drove to a lawyer's office downtown. The sleek space hummed with the sound of typing, the air sharp with the scent of polished wood and ink. My lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Clara, nodded as I laid out Sophia's fraud-fake clients' maxed-out cards, a lifestyle built on lies. "Send this to her sponsors," I said, handing her a USB drive with my research. She typed her fingers swift, and I hit send on an email exposing Sophia's deceit. The door opened, and Richard stepped in, his face lined with guilt. "I failed you, Evelyn," he said, his voice low. "Not anymore." My throat tightened. Richard, who'd been glued to his phone through years of my sacrifices, was here now, his hand on my shoulder. I nodded, my resolve hardening. The email was out, a match struck in Sophia's paper empire. Back at the apartment, soft jazz drifted from a neighbor's window, mingling with the evening chill. I sat at the kitchen table, the house deed in front of me, its ink a testament to my years of work, quitting teaching, draining my aunt's inheritance. The door burst open and Sophia stormed in her eyes, wild. "You'll regret this," she hissed, her scarf slipping. I stood, my voice calm. "Your lies are over, Sophia." My phone buzzed, a news alert flashing. Sophia's sponsors had pulled out, her business collapsing. I smiled, small but fierce. The email had worked faster than I'd dreamed. Sophia's empire was dust, and I held the deed to her ruin. The audience, mothers, women worn by giving, would cheer this the moment I stopped being invisible. Can truth rebuild what lies destroyed? I folded the deed, my fingers steady the jazz. A soft pulse in the background. Sophia's downfall was just the beginning, and Nathan's desperation would follow. Would she fight back at the bookstore event? I told Daniel he was my son, and the weight of 35 years fell between us. I lost one son to betrayal. Could I gain another through truth? The break room in Daniel's Worthington, Ohio bookstore was a quiet haven cluttered with stacked books and boxes, the air thick with the scent of peppermint tea, steaming in chipped mugs. A single bulb cast soft shadows, warming the wooden walls. Nathan's cruelty, his "you're nothing," and torn photo album still burned, as did Sophia's collapsing empire, her sponsors fleeing after my email. I clutched the hospital documents, their edges worn from my restless fingers. The truth about the nursery switch was heavy, but I was ready to share it. My resolve a steady flame. Daniel sat across from me, his glasses fogging slightly from the tea's steam. I slid the documents forward, my voice trembling but clear. "I'm your mother, Daniel." His eyes widened, scanning the papers, hospital forms, my aunt's letter, a DNA test. "This is a lot," he said, exhaling, his hands gripping the mug. "Can we go slow?" I nodded, tears pricking my eyes. His kindness, so unlike Nathan's, stirred a fragile hope. I'd raised a stranger who hurt me, but here was my real son, cautious, yet open. "I just needed you to know," I said, my voice soft. He looked at me, his brow furrowed, grappling with a past he'd never questioned. The moment was raw, a bridge between us built on truth. Women like me who'd loved through loss would feel this hope, this ache for connection. Back at my aunt's apartment, moonlight slipped through cracked blinds, casting silver streaks across the creaky floor. I sat at the kitchen table, the deed and my memoir notes beside me, when Nathan barged in, his face flushed with denial. "You made me this way," he shouted, pointing at the documents I'd shown him. "You forced me to need you." His words were a desperate defense, refusing responsibility for his cruelty. I pulled out my phone, hitting record, my voice steady. "You chose to hurt me, Nathan," I said. "You tore my memories apart." His eyes flickered, but he turned away, unyielding. My heart sank, but my resolve surged. His denial was fuel pushing me toward a public stand against Sophia's lies. I'd expose her at her own event, keys in hand. My phone buzzed, Sophia's social media post glowing on the screen. She'd announced a bookstore event to set the record straight about her business. Her words dripped with false confidence, a final scheme to salvage her image. I clutched the house keys, their metal cold and grounding. My memoir pages, scribbled with years of sacrifice and pain, lay ready. I'd face her not as the maid she mocked, but as the woman who held the truth. The jazz from a neighbor's window floated in a soft rhythm to my racing heart. Sophia's empire was dust, and Nathan's denial couldn't stop me. The audience mothers who'd been erased would stand with me, their anger at Nathan's refusal to own his actions mirroring mine. Can a mother's love survive the truth? I tucked the keys into my pocket, their weight, a promise of justice. Daniel's cautious acceptance, Nathan's denial, and Sophia's scheming were threads in a tapestry I was weaving anew. What would I say? At Sophia's event, I stood before the crowd, keys in hand, ready to shatter Sophia's lies and reclaim my voice. I gave them everything, my career, my savings, my heart. Now I'd take back my worth with a single sentence. Daniel's bookstore in Worthington, Ohio, was alive with the hum of a community event, its shelves casting long shadows under warm light. The air carried the sweet scent of apple pie from a nearby table, mingling with coffee and whispered chatter. My fingers tightened around the house keys, their metal edges sharp against my palm. Nathan's abuse. "You're nothing." And Sophia's mocking maid had pushed me to this moment. The hospital switch, the deed in my name. The truth about Daniel, they'd all led me here. My resolve a fire no one could extinguish. The crowd hushed as Sophia stepped to the microphone, her black dress pristine, her smile a fragile mask. "I'm a victim of lies." She declared, her voice trembling with feigned sincerity. My business was sabotaged. Heads nodded, but I saw the doubt in their eyes. I stepped forward, my memoir pages clutched tight, my heart pounding. "I'm Evelyn Harper," I said, my voice clear, cutting through the hum. "And I have a story." I read aloud my words, painting Sophia's fraud, fake clients, maxed out cards, a leased life built on my sacrifices. I paid for their home. I said, eyes on Sophia, and they called me their maid. The crowd gasped, whispers rising. I tossed the keys to Sophia, their jangle loud in the silence. "Good luck with the mortgage," I said, my tone sharp but steady. Sophia caught them, her face paling, her mask crumbling. The audience, mothers, women like me, would feel this triumph, this reclaiming of a life erased. Nathan pushed through the crowd, his head bowed, his shirt wrinkled. "I was wrong, Mom," he whispered, his voice breaking. His eyes, once cold, glistened with regret. I looked at him, the boy I'd raised, who'd torn my memories apart. "I'm done fixing you," I said, my voice firm but not cruel. Abby clapped from the side, her face bright with pride. "You're incredible, Mom," she whispered, her hand brushing mine. Her support, so long absent, warmed me like the bookstore's light. I stood taller, the weight of years lifting. The crowd's applause grew a wave of validation, but Nathan's hunched shoulders and Sophia's stunned silence were my true victory. Sophie, my granddaughter, darted forward, her arms wrapping around me. "Your story's mine now, Grandma," she said, her voice fierce with admiration. Her notebook, filled with poems inspired by me, peeked from her bag. My phone buzzed a text from Sophia's last sponsor. "We're done. No more funds." I grinned, the final nail in Sophia's empire. I stood tall, my voice steady. The keys gone, my worth reclaimed. The audience, women who'd felt invisible, would cheer this moment, the moment a mother became more than her sacrifices. Did I find myself by letting them go? The keys were a symbol not just of a house, but of a life I'd given away. Now I was free, my story told. But Daniel had asked me to meet tomorrow. What did he want to share? Daniel's gift wasn't just a key. It was a door to a life I'd never dared dream. I lost one family to betrayal. Could I build another with truth? Daniel's bookstore in Worthington, Ohio, glowed with warm light. The new beginnings section, a cozy nook of polished shelves and soft rugs. The air carried the scent of fresh coffee and new books, mugs, clinking softly as patrons chatted. I stood by a display of memoirs, my fingers tracing the keychain. From my mother, its weight lighter now. Nathan's abuse. "You're nothing," and his torn album lingered like a bruise, but my public stand at Sophia's, event keys tossed, had freed me. The truth about Daniel, my real son, was a bridge I was crossing step by careful step. Daniel led me to the new section, his smile warm behind his glasses. "This is for you," he said, pressing a brass key into my hand. "You belong here." We sat with peppermint tea steam curling between us and laughed about old novels, his love for poetry, my fondness for stories of resilience. "You're like family," he said softly, his eyes searching mine. My heart swelled, the word family, a gift. He'd learned of the hospital switch, his adoption, and yet here he was opening a door to me. I sipped my tea, its warmth spreading through me. The pain of Nathan's cruelty. Sophia's lies faded in this moment. I wasn't just a mother scorned, I was a woman building something new. Women like me who'd given everything would feel this hope, this chance to start again. Abby and Richard arrived, their footsteps soft on the bookstore's hardwood. Abby's face lit up. "I'm so proud, Mom," she said, her voice thick with emotion. Her hand squeezed mine, a connection I'd missed since she'd drifted caught in her career in Sophia's shadow. Richard stood beside her, his usual stiff posture softened. "I see you now, Evelyn," he said, his voice low, heavy with regret for years spent distant, buried in work. I nodded, my throat tight. My phone buzzed, Nathan's name flashing. "Can we talk someday?" his text read. I stared at it, his humbled words a faint echo of the boy I'd raised. I didn't reply, not yet. My heart was full, but not for him, not now. Abby and Richard's support, Daniel's key, were enough. I wandered to a quiet corner, the clink of mugs fading. Tucked in my purse was my aunt's diary, its pages worn. A loose note slipped out, written by Daniel's adoptive mother. "He's special." Like his birth mom, it read. My breath caught, she'd suspected the switch. Tears pricked my eyes, not from pain, but from a deep, quiet peace. I drove to the post office, mailing a check from the house sale to a women's foundation, a gift for those starting over like me. Back at the bookstore, I smiled, the key in my pocket, a symbol of a life reclaimed. The audience mothers, women worn by giving, would hold their breath at this, the moment I chose myself. Is family what we build, not what we're born to? I turned the key in my fingers, its shine catching the light. Daniel, Abby, Richard. They were my family, now built on truth, not obligation. But Nathan's text lingered. Would I open the door to him again? I walked my old streets, not as a mother, but as Evelyn, free at last. I gave my life to them. Now I live it for me. The Worthington, Ohio neighborhood shimmered in the autumn sun, oak trees blazing gold, their leaves drifting like soft whispers across the pavement. The farmer's market bustled nearby, voices rising in a cheerful hum, the faint scent of cinnamon curling from a bakery's open door. My boots clicked on the sidewalk, each step lighter than the last. Nathan's cruelty, his torn photo album, his venomous, "You're nothing." And Sophia's mocking maid had once anchored me to pain. The hospital switched the deed in my name. The truth about Daniel had unshackled me. I was no longer the woman who begged for their love. I was Evelyn Harper, fulfilled whole and free. The morning air was crisp, carrying the chatter of vendors hawking apples and homemade jams. I paused by a stall, the vendor's smile warm as she handed me a sample of apple butter. Made it myself, she said, her apron dusted with flour. I tasted it, the sweetness grounding me, a reminder of the life I'd built here. 35 years ago, I'd moved to Worthington, a young mother with dreams of teaching, dreams I'd traded for Nathan and Abby's future. I'd paid the mortgage, framed their school photos, baked pies for their birthdays. Now those memories felt distant, like pages in a book I'd closed. I walked on the market's buzz, fading the oak trees, standing tall, their roots deep, like the strength I'd found. Daniel's bookstore was my destination, its green-painted exterior glowing under the morning light. The bell above the door jingled as I stepped inside, the air rich with the scent of fresh coffee and new books. Shelves towered around me, their spines a mosaic of stories, much like my own. Daniel stood behind the counter, his glasses slipping as he sorted a stack of novels. Abby and Sophie were already there, sitting in the New Beginnings section, a cozy nook with a soft rug and a small table holding a coffee pot. Mugs clinked as they poured their laughter soft, a sound I hadn't heard in years. Mom Abby called her face bright, her dark hair pulled back in a loose bun. Sophie, my granddaughter, looked up from her notebook, her pen pausing mid-sentence. "Grandma, you're here," she said, her smile wide. I joined them, settling into a cushioned chair, the coffee's warmth seeping through my mug. Sophie slid her notebook across the table, her eyes shining. "I wrote this for you," she said, her voice fierce with pride. The poem was titled, "The Woman Who Stood Its Lines," weaving a story of a mother rising from shadows, her strength a beacon. "You taught me strength," Grandma Sophie said, her hand brushing mine. My throat tightened, tears pricking my eyes. Her words were a gift, a mirror to the woman I'd become. Abby squeezed my arm, her touch steady. "We're here, Mom," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I'm so proud of you." Her reconciliation, sparked by guilt over missing my 50th birthday, had grown into a bond I'd thought lost. I smiled, my heart full, the bookstore's warmth wrapping around us like an embrace. Daniel approached his apron dusted with coffee grounds. "You're family now," he said, his voice soft, his eyes searching mine. The hospital switch revealed in that quiet break room had changed him too. He'd always felt different. He'd said a boy adopted by the Sullivans never quite fitting. Now he was here, not calling me Mom, but offering something better, connection built on choice, not obligation. We laughed over a shared love of old novels, his favorite poets' lines mingling with my memories of reading to Nathan and Abby. The pain of Nathan's betrayal, his torn album. His grip on my arm faded in this moment. I sipped my coffee, its bitterness softened by cream, and felt a peace I hadn't known in years. Women like me who'd poured their lives into others would feel this too, the quiet joy of being seen. The bookstore door opened and Richard stepped in his coat, unbuttoned, his face softer than I'd seen in decades. He'd been distant, lost in his financial planning career while I raised the kids, but his support at the lawyer's office had shifted something. We left the bookstore, walking through the neighborhood, oak leaves crunching under our boots. The market's chatter faded, replaced by the rustle of wind through the trees. "I should have seen you sooner," Richard said, his voice low, heavy with regret, for years spent on his phone missing my sacrifices. His hand grazed mine, tentative but warm. "We're here now," I said, my voice steady. I glanced at our old house in the distance, its windows dark, sold to new owners. I didn't flinch. Nathan's absence, his unanswered text, "Can we talk someday?" was a choice I'd made. Sophia's empire had collapsed, her lies exposed at the bookstore event. I tossed her the keys, said good luck with the mortgage, and walked away. That moment had freed me, a symbolic act of reclaiming my life. We paused by the bakery, its cinnamon scent wrapping around us like a memory of Thanksgivings past. I thought of the pies I'd baked for Nathan and Abby, the holidays I'd spent making a home. Those memories were mine, not theirs to destroy. Richard looked at me, his eyes glistening. "You're stronger than I ever knew," he said. I nodded, letting go of the past, the hurt, the woman who'd begged for their love. The oak trees stood tall, their golden leaves a testament to change, to roots that endured. I was Evelyn, not just a mother, but a woman who'd chosen herself. Back at the apartment, moonlight slipped through cracked blinds, casting silver streaks across the creaky floor. I sat at the kitchen table, my memoir pages spread out their words, a map of my journey from Nathan's maid to Sophia's downfall, from Daniel's truth to this moment of peace. My phone buzzed, an email from the Women's Foundation glowing on the screen. "Your donation from the house sale is helping others start over," it read. I smiled, my pen moving across a blank page. Did I raise them or did they erase me? I wrote the words, "a final release." The foundation's email was a micro twist, a quiet confirmation of my impact, tying my legacy to others who'd been undervalued, overlooked. I closed my notebook, the cinnamon scent lingering in my mind, the oak trees outside a symbol of the roots I'd reclaimed. Did I raise them or did they erase me? I leaned back, my heart steady, my life my own. The bookstore. Daniel, Abby, Sophie, Richard. They were my family, now built on truth, not obligation. The future stretched before me, a blank page waiting for my story. What new chapter would I write next? What new chapter would I write next? The question lingered as I stood in Daniel's bookstore, the Worthington, Ohio air crisp with November's chill. The oak trees outside swayed their bare branches, scratching the sky, a reminder that seasons change, and so had I. The New Beginnings section glowed with warm light, the scent of fresh coffee mingling with the musty tang of old books. My memoir pages sat on a shelf, a slim volume I'd self-published its cover, simple but bold, The Woman I Am. The bell above the door jingled, and I turned, my heart steady but curious, ready for whatever came next. The past months had rewritten my life. Nathan's cruelty, his torn album, his You're Nothing, and Sophia's mocking maid had faded like ink on weathered paper. The hospital switch revealing Daniel as my true son had been a wound and a gift. I'd tossed Sophia the house keys, said good luck with the mortgage, and walked away, my worth reclaimed. Abby's reconciliation, Sophie's poems, Richard's support, and Daniel's quiet acceptance had built a new family, not bound by blood but by choice. The donation from the house sale to the Women's Foundation was my legacy, a hand extended to others starting over. Yet as I stood here, I felt a stirring and unfinished story, a path I hadn't yet walked. Daniel appeared from behind a shelf, his glasses slipping a stack of books in his arms. "Evelyn," he said, his smile soft, "we're hosting a reading tonight. Want to share a page?" My stomach fluttered. I'd read at the bookstore event exposing Sophia's lies, but this was different, intimate, a chance to share my heart. Maybe I said, my fingers brushing my memoir. He nodded, his eyes warm. "No pressure. You're family now." That word family settled over me like a quilt, warm and heavy. Daniel, adopted by the Sullivans, had always felt different, and now he was here, not calling me Mom, but offering a bond I'd never expected. I sipped my coffee, its bitterness softened by cream, and nodded. "I'll think about it." The bookstore filled as evening fell, locals trickling in their coats dusted with frost. The New Beginnings section was packed, chairs, creaking mugs, clinking on the wooden table. Sophie bounced in her notebook, clutched tight, Abby trailing behind her, smile bright. Richard followed his posture, relaxed, a far cry from the man who'd once lived behind his phone. "You've got this." "Mom, Abby," whispered, squeezing my hand. Her guilt over missing my 50th birthday had faded, replaced by a closeness we'd rebuilt. Sophie grinned. "Read the part about the keys, Grandma." Her enthusiasm, her poetry, was a spark lighting up the room. I laughed, my nerves, easing the coffee's warmth, spreading through me. I stepped to the podium, my memoir in hand, the crowd's hum quieting. The light caught my gray hair, and I stood tall, no longer the woman who'd begged for love. "This is my story," I began, my voice steady. I read a passage about the night I left Nathan's, pushed Sophia's taunt, and the keys I'd tossed. I was their mother, but they erased me, I said, pausing, until I wrote myself back. The crowd leaned in, their eyes soft, some glistening. Women like me, mothers, grandmothers, women who'd given too much, nodded, their faces mirrors of my own journey. A woman in the back, her hair streaked with silver, wiped a tear. My words were theirs, a shared song of resilience. As I finished, applause rose warm and steady. Sophie clapped loudest, her notebook raised like a flag. Daniel approached, his hand light on my shoulder. "That was powerful," he said, his voice low. "You're helping people." My throat tightened. Helping others was why I donated the house proceeds, why I'd written this book. I glanced at the shelf where a few copies had already sold. The bell jingled again, and my heart skipped. A familiar figure stood in the doorway, Nathan, his coat worn, his face thinner than I remembered. The crowd didn't notice, but Abby did, her hand tightening on mine. "What's he doing here?" she whispered. I froze, the keys in my pocket suddenly heavy. Nathan's text, "Can we talk someday?" had gone unanswered. His abuse, his denial of the hospital switch had severed our bond. Yet here he was, eyes downcast, hands shoved in his pockets. I stepped off the podium, my resolve wavering. "Stay here," I told Abby, my voice firm. I approached Nathan, the bookstore's warmth fading as I neared him. "Why are you here?" I asked, my tone even. He shifted, his breath shaky. "I read your book," he said. I see what I did." His voice cracked, and I saw the boy I'd raised, not the man who'd hurt me. "I'm sorry, Mom." My chest ached, not with pain, but with something softer. Pity, perhaps, but not forgiveness. Not yet. "I don't know if there's a place for you," I said, my words gentle but clear. "I've built something new." His eyes glistened, but he nodded, stepping back. "I'll wait," he said, and left the bells jingle sharp in the silence. Abby joined me, her arm around my shoulders. "You didn't owe him that," she said. I nodded, the weight of his apology lingering. Women like me would understand this choice to protect the peace I'd earned, even from a son I'd loved. The event ended, and I stayed late helping Daniel stack chairs. The bookstore was quiet now, the coffee pot empty, the air cool. He handed me a small package wrapped in brown paper. "Open it later," he said, his smile shy. Back at my apartment, moonlight spilled through cracked blinds, the creaky floorboards soft under my feet. I unwrapped the package, finding a journal, its cover embossed with new beginnings. Inside was a note from Daniel's adoptive mother slipped between the pages. "He's special like his birth mom," it read, echoing the diary note I'd found. My eyes stung. She'd known somehow, and now Daniel was choosing me just as I'd chosen him. I sat at the kitchen table, my memoir beside the journal. My phone buzzed, an email from the Women's Foundation glowing on the screen. "Your donation is changing lives." It read, listing women who'd started businesses, left toxic homes, found their voices. I smiled, my pen moving across a blank page in the journal. Did I raise them, or did they erase me? I wrote the words, no longer a question, but a truth I'd answered. I'd raised a family, but I'd also raised myself from the ashes of betrayal to a life of my own. The cinnamon scent from the morning's bakery lingered in my memory, the oak trees outside a symbol of roots I'd reclaimed. I walked to the window, the moonlight silver on the glass. Worthington slept its streets quiet, but my heart was awake. I'd read at more events Daniel promised, and Sophie wanted to publish her poems. Abby and Richard were planning a holiday dinner, a new tradition in my new home. The foundation had invited me to speak, to share my story with others starting over. I was Evelyn Harper, not just a mother, but a woman with a voice, a legacy, a future. The journal lay open, its pages blank, waiting for my next words. What story would I tell tomorrow? The keys I tossed to Sophia, their jangle echoing in the bookstore, marked the moment I reclaimed my life. My journey from Nathan's cruel maid to finding Daniel. My true son taught me that family isn't just blood, it's the love we choose to nurture. In life, we may give everything only to feel erased, but listening to our hearts and others' truths can rebuild what's lost. Compassion, even when it's hard, keeps us connected, guiding us back to those who see us. Like a Worthington oak, love's roots endure bending, but never breaking. If my story touched you, share your own in the comments. I'd love to hear how you found your strength. Your voice matters, and I hope you'll join me for the next chapter.